I've had this Nikon Z 180 to 600mm f5.6 to 6.3 VR lens for just on 1 year now. In this video, I'm going to be talking about some of the pros and cons, as well as sharing some of the stills and video from this lens throughout the year. Now, am I happy I bought it, or do I regret it? Find out next. One year. Man, that time has flown, hasn't it? I mean, I can remember vividly taking delivery of this lens and how much anticipation I had inside of me because I'd waited so long for this lens to be created. And I don't know if you can remember, but we were all expecting a 200 to 600, but Nikon threw in a little bit of a curveball and gave us a 180 to 600mm lens. So I'll begin with why I actually bought this lens in the first place. The main type of photography I like to do is landscape and birds and wildlife. And before the Nikon Z 180 to 600mm lens was released, I was using my older Nikon 80 to 400mm f-mount lens in conjunction with an FTZ2 adapter. Now, by no means am I saying the 80 to 400mm lens was bad. In fact, I still own that lens and it's fantastic on my D750 and D850 cameras. I just wanted a dedicated Z-mount telephoto lens for when I was photographing birds and wildlife. So up until this lens was actually announced, Nikon were releasing their other nice telephoto prime lens range, and I'm talking about the Z 400 f4.5 as well as that 800 f6.3. Both of those lenses were absolutely brilliant, but they were just out of my price range. As soon as the Nikon 180 to 600mm was announced, mid-2023, I jumped on the net and ordered the lens the same night. I had to wait just a little over a month for the lens to be delivered due to its short supply because of its popularity. Now, of course, as soon as I got this lens, I was like a kid on Christmas. I threw it straight onto my Nikon Z7, flew out the door here and went straight out into my bird garden and started firing off shots. Now, straight away, I knew I'd made the right choice. The lens was doing everything I wanted it to do and more. My initial impressions of the lens was that I loved the short zoom throw from 180 to 600mm, and the VR handheld when shooting video was excellent. So over the last year, I've been out doing my thing with this lens, and what I'm going to do now is I'll share some both stills and video with you just before I start talking about some of the pros and cons. So what have I learned about this Nikon Z 180 to 600mm lens in the year that I've had it? Well, let me talk about the pros first, and then I'll talk about some of the cons. Firstly, I really love the short throw from the zoom, going from 180 to 600mm with a simple flick of my wrist. Secondly, the VR on the lens, particularly when I'm filming handheld B-roll for my YouTube videos, is pretty awesome. Thirdly, the image quality with the copy of the lens that I received has been excellent. I'm very happy with the images I've gotten in both stills and video. Actually, I've had some comments from some people on some of the videos I made with this lens that they weren't getting sharp images, but whether that's a skill level thing or maybe they were unlucky with getting a dud lens, I don't know. If you'd like to see how I get even sharper images from this lens, I've made a video on that and I'll leave it at the end of this video. You can check out a little bit later on. I love the large lens hood, and the weight I found wasn't too bad when running and gunning using a shoulder strap, just to give my arms a bit of a rest every now and then. The cons, well, I can't be too critical of this lens considering the price point, as compared to some of those more expensive Z telephoto prime lenses that are on the market at the moment. But there are some improvements I think that could have been made with this lens. Firstly, I don't like the positioning and the width of the manual focus ring. I'm forever fumbling around trying to find that thin ring behind the zoom ring. I would have preferred it in front of the zoom ring so I could just glide my hand down without having to take my eye away from the viewfinder. Also, the location of the auto and manual focus switch being at the rear of the lens. It's kind of like a little bit of a hassle because you have to take your left hand that's supporting the lens and bring it back towards the end of the lens where the camera mount is. And that puts a lot of pressure on the lens mount. Lastly, the tripod mount. And this seems to be a recurring issue with Nikon Z telephoto prime lenses at the moment. It isn't an Arca Swiss mount. So if you really do want that particular mount to fit comfortably on your monopod or tripod, then you'll have to buy a third-party Arca Swiss mount plate. Interesting side note, third-party lens manufacturers like Tamron do produce their telephoto lenses with the Arca Swiss mount already included. In summation, am I happy that I bought this Nikon Z 180 to 600mm lens, or do I regret it? Well, the answer to that is I'm extremely happy, considering the price point that I paid for this lens and the results that I have got in both stills and video. The pros far outweigh the cons for me when it comes to this lens. The only little disappointment that I've got, and it's nothing really to do with the lens, it's more to do with me, is that I've been using it with an older Nikon Z7. And realistically, I bought this Z7 for landscape photography, not for birds and wildlife. So that will be changing very soon towards the end of the year. So watch this space. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this long-term review of this lens. Never stop creating, and I'll see you next time.